Well, good morning. It's 8 a.m. and it looks like we've got everybody here, or just about everyone. Olivia, would you do the roll call, please? And you're on mute. We could hear you all those times you asked if we could hear you, except that last one.
I got to get used to the headphones. Okay, we have Cameron Grant, Tom DeBee, Arlene Zortman, and Jean Christopher. We also have Polly Christensen, Kathy Fedler, Lisa Gallinar, Karen Roney, and Kendra Daniels.
And I'm trying to log on.
And Harold's trying to log on.
And Lauren Seeley is absent today, it looks like. Great, thank you. First item of business is approval of the minutes from our May 18th meeting. Those have been included in the packet. Does anyone have any revision or other comment regarding those minutes? Arlene?
Cameron, there was one area where there was a duplication of words, but I don't have that copy in front of me. So I think we can just approve them.
All right, anything else? All right, well then I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
I second.
The motion by Jean, second by Arlene, all in favor, thumbs up. Approved unanimously. Next item for business would be public invited to be heard. Olivia, do we have anyone from the public who has indicated a desire to talk today?
No, we do not.
Okay, well then we'll move on to new and old business. Item 4, a discussion of retreat items regarding LHA. And as I recall, the council retreat is scheduled for the morning of July 9th, excuse me. And we have quite a bit of information in the packet that I think helps get us up to speed. But is there someone that would like to take the lead on warming us up into this discussion?
Sure, I can do that. So I thought I would go through just a little bit on the financial and other tools available, then the land, kind of how it's outlined in the packet, some of the data that we provided, and then start going through the goals discussion, if that makes sense to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't sure how much you were able to read and digest, but these are probably just some of the financial and other tools that are available to the Housing Authority. I'm sure there are other ones that I have missed or forgotten about. But you do have a number of things that the Housing Authority does have available to us. Currently, you have a nonprofit partner with the LHDC, which allows the Housing Authority to do things that they otherwise could not do by working with that nonprofit partner. Nonprofits can often be more nimble than a HUD reg burdened housing authority, and often can access funding that requires a nonprofit status versus a housing authority. The other thing I didn't put down that I realized this morning, they also can go outside of the City of Longmont boundaries. The LHDC covers the entire St. Vrains Valley School District. So they do have the ability to go to Frederick Firestone and to Lyons. They just have a broader area if that's something that we want to continue to consider. Tax exemption status. LHA can provide tax exemptions to other partners, either nonprofit or for-profit entities that are providing affordable housing. And as soon as we got involved with the Housing Authority, the city did, it became very apparent this is a very, very powerful tool that you have available to you. A lot of housing authorities charge pretty large sums of money to developers to use that tax exempt status. And the monetary value can take a lot of different forms: actual cash payment upfront and or ongoing. Being able to have the Housing Authority be part of the project as a partner, and an ability to negotiate other things that you might want, like first right of refusal to purchase a property, et cetera. You have property management capacity that we are strengthening and getting into a pretty good shape. So that is something that you could start offering in a partnership capacity. You don't have to own the properties to be able to manage them. So that is a service that you could charge. Also, you can hold land on behalf of others, which allows the land to be kept off the tax rolls until it's ready to develop. You have a value in accessing other funding that especially for-profit developers cannot do. So one of the things with the Chrisman development is they're having the Housing Authority be the applicant to the State Division of Housing for additional funding, because the Housing Authority would be eligible for a grant versus a loan if it's the actual developer that goes in and gets the funding. Bonding capacity and capability, or bank qualified debt issuance. So Housing Authority bonds can be issued by the Housing Authority. Up to 10 million per year can be issued. We have done this in the past. I think for Fall River, there was actually bonds that were issued for that project. The interest that's earned by investors is exempt from federal taxes and may also be exempt from state and local income taxes. So this is a valuable tool. And I know there's a couple of different instances, like with the Longmont Christian Housing and Hover Manor, where we did, the LHA did on behalf of borrowing. So actually went to the bank and got more favorable rates than a regular nonprofit, because it's triple tax exempt, I think is the wording. So they actually borrowed the money and then turned around and lent it to the other nonprofit. So there's a couple of different ways you can access funding to the benefit of others, which brings money into the Housing Authority, because you can charge to issue the bonds. You can charge for an extra percentage of interest if it's a bank qualified, et cetera. Property and land value that you guys own, you can at different points in time divest yourself of some of the property or land at market rate prices and reinvest in other affordable housing development, depending on what's going on. So if you remember, not too long ago, the Housing Authority, I think it was the Housing Authority that owned those, divested themselves of Terry Street apartments, which were, I think, 21 total units on the 600, 700 block of, no, 500 block of Terry Street, and sold those at market rate prices, and then turned around and reinvested those in Spring Creek and Fall River. So that is something that you could consider as some of the properties that you own come out of the tax credit, if you wanted to do something like that, instead of reinvesting, just an option. And of course, the land that you own as well. And then project basing vouchers is highly valuable. Dedicating vouchers to a project provides additional subsidy and frees up equity and borrowing capacity for a project, especially when you're covering 30% and 40% AMI units. So it actually offsets the subsidy needed to provide those units, and therefore lowering the funding needed to borrow for those to cover those units, and that frees up money that they could be borrowed for other investments. And it's in the range of, I don't have my figures right in front of me, but in the range of like $100,000 to $200,000 per voucher over the life of the project is what it brings in. Are there any questions on any of those tools, or did anybody think of any others that I had forgotten about, or that we've used in the past? Okay. All right, then briefly going through the land that's available to the Longmont Housing Authority. As you know, you own 3.8 acres jointly with the city at the Sunset Campus down by the Suites. And there is a map in there that shows how the property was subdivided, with lot 1 being the Suites property and lot 2 being the vacant land that's available. It is under an option to purchase contract with Element Properties, and they can take it down in chunks after subdividing it further. for project development. We would have to approve how they are choosing to subdivide that. The current proposal is for 55 units of permanent supportive housing to go down in that southwest corner of Lot 2. And then there is possibility for additional development on Lot 1 in that southeast corner of the current parking lot. So that is another option that might be available. The Suites property is overparked, well parked for what is down there. So there is a ability to perhaps develop something further down there. And then, of course, you own 2.4 acres of land at the Hover Crossing campus, right west of Hearthstone and Lodge. This is owned by the LHDC via a loan from the city, which needs to be repaid in March of 2023 unless it's extended further. It has long been thought of for family housing, perhaps rental townhomes that would tie in the neighborhood a little bit more similarly than to put in another large rental project on the property. But obviously that's your choice. There's nothing that says you have to do that. But it might be a good segue for the neighborhood because there's single family houses to the north and east of Hearthstone Lodge, and then you've got Hearthstone Lodge and then this property. So maybe something like an Aspen Meadows neighborhood townhome property. Is there any questions on that?
Hey, Kathy, do you want to kind of talk about do you want me, or do you want to talk about the conversations that we're having with that company out of, or I think we have already done it, but Buena Vista?
And then
the
Arlene
lodge.
had a question too, I think.
Arlene, why don't you go first?
It's actually kind of a little bit more than one question. On the 3.8 acres at Sunset Campus, I noticed that there is a floodplain there. What kind of impact is that going to have on the use of the land?
If I'm looking at in terms of the area that is where the existing building is, there's not a floodplain issue there. So if you take the existing footprint, we're clear there to the, trying to see the position there to the south. And as I look at it, we actually do have some room as we get closer to Spring Gulch to move. I think the floodplain really encompasses the area that we will have to have as a walkway pathway as part of the future development of that as a greenway. That's already, the easements are already there for the city on that side. So it's actually more clear than it would appear. And that's really, if you look at the capacity that's in the gulch is just to the west of there, and as it's moving east in the depth. So we didn't really see the issues floodplain wise,
Okay.
like we would in other areas.
Is there public transportation available to the people if we add some more units out there? The bus goes out there?
The bus goes just to the west of there. I know there's stops around Village at the Peaks. And I think if we add more, they may be more willing to put an additional stop just because of what's there, but it's not far from there.
Okay. And if you want to add some more units in Lot 1, how many units are you looking at this point?
Well, that, how many was in that? Kathy, do you remember how many was in the element?
55.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing somewhere in the 40 to 50 range. You could, that would probably be the most.
Okay. And then on the 2.4 acres at Hover Crossing, I know you're looking at family housing. How many units and then how many bedrooms? And then is there a possibility, I know that you're thinking townhomes to kind of make it blend in with the area over there, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm just wondering if we could incorporate some condos in there, say like maybe in a 2-3 level that would give additional housing and maybe be a little bit more affordable.
So that one's the one that I was talking about, talking to you all about. So there is a company that we were introduced, and I forgot their name, but they're out of Buena Vista, and they do and when I say the term manufactured housing, don't think of what you traditionally think manufactured housing looks like.
Prefab, right?
Yeah, it's more a prefab, but they come in and they build them in a plant, and then they come in and they stack them, and they do everything from market rate to affordable, although their model's built on trying to provide affordable housing. So they work with a company out of Berkeley that really does this affordable development. And so what you'll have to do is really come in with a development partner and run through some iterations in terms of how much space you have, what it looks like, what can fit, because what you're going to try to do is maximize your value on the land and provide as many units as you can in a way that serves the individuals. So we will be, as we look to that, we will be working with different groups and groups that really specialize in the affordable housing world and trying to achieve our goal. So it's hard to say what it is right now, but we really want the experts to come in and know what we need to do, and then really manage our parking requirements and all of those things to ensure we're maximizing the use of the land, but really providing high quality housing for families.
Okay.
So more to come on that, once we start getting into design options.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd want to do a
Harold,
market.
was that Fading West? Is that the company in Buena Vista?
I think that's it.
They do some, it almost looks like a new urbanist community.
Yeah. So it is that Fading West group. I think that's the
Yeah.
name of them. And they're the ones that did the affordable housing there. And where it's really attractive to us as a community is we're also having conversations if there's an interest in building, excuse me, a manufacturing plant here on the Front Range. And so, and I can tell you that I know that there's a market rate developer working to partner with them too. So if we can sort of all coalesce around the same time frame, then we get a different economy of scale and a different price point because of the transportation cost. But yeah, it's sort of a new urbanist design, dense, open green spaces in, really attractive. And, you know, frankly, their price points go from, I would say 250 upwards to 550. So that's why we say they get into the market rate too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I won't go through the statistics of the housing choice voucher information that I provided unless anybody has any specific questions. I think suffice it to say that we are reaching very low income, the extremely low is the 30% and below primarily with those, with that program. It's a good distribution between elderly, disabled, and households, families. Race and ethnicity is good and reflective of the community. The size of household is skewed towards 1 and 2 people primarily because of the high number of elderly that we do have in properties. And then what was a little bit surprising to me was the amount of time that folks have been on the program. I thought this would be a little bit lower, but the majority have been on 10 to 20 years on the program. So, so that's a little interesting, I guess. And we need to.
Kathy, all these statistics that you gave us, are these the current LHA program?
Correct. The current LHA voucher and tenant-based voucher and project-based voucher information. Well, actually, it was pulled in February, so it's not totally current, but it's this year current.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Which Kathy's a total of about how many households? Is it 400 and some?
Yes, 402, 410,
Yeah. Okay.
something like that. Okay, so what I did based on the discussion that we had at the May meeting, I did pull in the LHA mission, the 5-year plan mission, if you remember the 5-year admin plan that we reviewed early in 2021 and that the housing board adopted. And then the city and LHA merged vision. So those are at the top of the next page. And then looking at the feedback that we got from May, just some of the comments that were made, and looking at the 5-year plan goals, which is that document that we had to do for HUD. It seemed like the overall goals fit pretty well with where you were going and what kinds of things you were thinking of. So what I thought was, what I did was I added in red color some of the additional ideas that you guys tossed out at the May 18th meeting. I had at least one item in blue that I remember that we have discussed in the past that I added in there. And then everything in black is what's currently in the 5-year plan. I know that's something that you wanted to review again. So it seemed like this might be a good time, and it might be a good framework for pulling something together, some recommendations for the Board of Commissioners when they have their retreat on July 9th. So if that makes sense, I can briefly go through the 5 goals and kind of what is on there. Or if you're ready to just jump in, that's fine too. If you had a chance to review it, I just wasn't sure how much time that you've had to give to this. Some of the later pages just show again what has been accomplished over the past several years under each of those goal categories, and what you continue to do and provide. So how would you want me to go through the goals, or do you want to just start discussion?
Kathy, can I ask a question before we jump in? And this may be the result of me missing the meeting last month, but as it relates to our role as the advisory board, I'm trying to make sure I'm plugged into where we're supposed to be, because it's been so many years actually being the LHA that sometimes I have to remember to make that we're wearing different hats right now. But am I right that our role on this would be to kind of review this and comment, and then make a recommendation to LHA that would say, these are some goals that we would recommend that you consider. Here are our comments, and then we step back and LHA adopts whatever they want to adopt, hopefully listening to some of our advice, right?
I think that's what we're shooting for.
Okay. So with that, I think it probably makes sense just to dive in. I don't know that we need a summary review, especially if these were discussed last month. But if anyone wants to wave their hands as we roll through it, I think we could slow down and as much as needed. All right, well, why don't we dive in?
I could share my thoughts first on where I see kind of our major goals. I mean, one of the things that I want to see is we just kind of have our development projects kind of in the hopper as we're needing them. Try and develop, every 3 to 5 years, have something in the hopper so that we can have that we're going to work with a developer to get additional affordable housing. And then in terms of that, if that isn't an option, then, we work with possibly kind of the other goal of seeking out some of the affordable housing projects that might be going offline, or seek out additional projects that we could just take over and convert those over to affordable housing. But I see us as, every 3 to 5 years, I would like, a development project kind of coming online, or at least we're planning for it.
So does that fit under number 1 here, to create affordable housing opportunities for the community?
Right.
So Tom, the last objective on page 15, purchase properties going out of LIHTC or other subsidies to preserve affordable homes would fall under your acquisition opportunities. as well as, I assume, market homes. So maybe expand that to be market rate as well.
Right.
Okay. And is the development projects lined up and ready to go? Is that covered under the first objective there, expanding rental housing opportunities for low income and vulnerable populations, or do you want it to be more specific around?
Well, I think we can maybe expand that a little bit more and just saying, you know, we're looking for opportunities to expand the opportunities and seek development.
Keep opportunities coming.
Yeah.
Polly?
I really like all of the, unsurprisingly, all of the blue things that have been added, because I think we need to really be a little more aggressive about, or broader in terms of how we're thinking of a housing authority. I would also, I really like what Tom said, and I would also expand that, because right now, I don't know if we have any money, anything that we are, well, during Christmas. Next time something comes up, if it's coming up soon, we, because of the cost of materials right now, because of the disruption of all the distribution and a number of other things, I think we could expand some of these things to not just purchase market rate homes and purchase properties going out of LHAAB, but also purchase some things that are motels and hotels and trailer parks. Because if we can't build anything right now, this would be a good time to be thinking about buying things that are already made, or homes that are that need a complete rehab that no one in their right mind wants to take on. But I do think this is a good time to think about, if we cannot build something in a feasible way right now, then buy up some things that are, for various reasons, coming up for sale. Trailer parks, as we all know, are the largest non-subsidized provider of affordable housing in the country. And right now, they're all being purchased by large corporations that turn them into kind of a nightmare, an unaffordable nightmare. And if we can buy them and then have people buy them back from us, or have them converted through ROC into a co-op, then we create something that's much more sustainable. We're doing good on the front end by helping people, and then we turn it over to them and create something sustainable. So that would be my preference too, is to add on to the top of either the bottom of page 15 or the top of page 16 to include hotels, motels, and trailer parks.
Arlene?
I think it's an interesting idea to look at hotels and motels, and I think that might be a way to get people to, you know, at least get off the streets or get some kind of housing. When I was looking at the charts, it was really obvious to me that when we're looking at families versus seniors, that there's a significant difference there between, you know, what's needed and the fact that women, single women, make up a large majority of the families. And so I'd like to see what it is that can be done to help those single women with their families find some kind of housing. And in order to do that, we'd also have to provide some sort of childcare, I'm sure. But I think we need to take a look at those women, and there may even be men, single men that are out there that are raising families. I think we need to take a look at those people. The other thing that I'm not quite sure how this works. I am wondering whether we should incorporate the different ages, the different generations into the facilities, rather than separating seniors out from the families, put them all into kind of the same areas, not particularly across parking lots like Aspen Meadows is, but into the same buildings, because I think you get some sort of a really neat cultural diverse interaction there with seniors and disabled and veterans and families, and they can all, there's just a lot of history that can go on. There's just a lot of information that can be shared. And I think that that's kind of a good way to, rather than separate people out, I'd like to see us bring more people together.
So Arlene, is the objective on page 15 focus on family/mixed age rental housing? Does that capture that?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the daycare, I did add objective 5 based on the conversation that there was last at May. And one of the objectives on there is providing daycare on some of the properties and or future properties.
And I think that's a good idea. And I think that if we're going to take a look at single mothers, I think we need to take a look at, can we work with maybe Front Range Community College in getting some education for those single parents? And if that's the case, then we may need to expand that childcare into the evenings, or even say on a Saturday, in order to help them move a little bit out of their level where they're at and into a different situation, which is actually good for the kids to see, and then is really good for the parent as well.
Polly?
Thank you, Arlene, for mentioning single parents. Having been one, having been a divorced mother, there's nothing available. And single mothers, there are at least, and there's single fathers too, of course. There are at least 12 million single parents supporting their households in this country. That means there are at least roughly 36 million people in that situation, if you're counting approximately 2 kids. And they have no childcare. Without childcare, they can't go to work. They are the only support. There is nothing in this society, and nobody talks about it, and single mothers are made to feel ashamed. It's a really, really critical thing, and childcare is a huge part of that. That's why a lot of women are not going back to work. During COVID, we've lost a huge amount of daycare. And so anyway, it's a really important concept that we actually think about protecting and trying to help out the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable groups in our society.
So can I ask a clarifying question on daycare and educational opportunities, et cetera? I am assuming it would be, we would want to do partnerships as opposed with existing resources, or to partner with, I know Karen's group and the Human Service Agency funding process does a lot of work on funding affordable quality childcare and early education programs as well, that we would want to more partner with existing things that are going on and or help expand in some way opportunities, maybe by providing a building that somebody could come into when we're developing, as opposed to the housing authority providing the services themselves. I just want to be clear if that's the direction that we're wanting to go, and really focus more on how can we support and partner with some of these services and programs, as opposed to recreating or creating new ones.
Well, I don't think we need to get into the daycare business, but there are plenty of organizations that do that, and plenty of daycare things that do that, that we could partner with. As you say, what they lack often is a building or some way to partner with people to make things a little more economically feasible for them. So that would be ideal, I think. And I do think, as Arlene said, there would be a lot of synergy if with mixed groups. In fact, you might find that some of those groups would also be able to be employed at the daycare centers. So on site, so that would be terrific.
Yeah,
And
I think oh, go ahead, Arlene.
And I think if you partner with some of the learning places like Front Range Community College, whatever else there is, that gives people the opportunity to maybe possibly get some sort of a nursing degree or some sort of a business degree that moves them out of the, working at McDonald's, not that there's anything wrong with that, but moves them maybe into a more steady, not quite all the time working Saturdays, Sundays, evenings, and makes it better for the children. And seniors, the thing that I have seen at some daycare centers is that seniors are very, very helpful in maybe just coming in, holding babies, rocking babies, reading to the children, and they do that on a volunteer basis and those kind of things. If you've got them in the same buildings, maybe just set aside an area where a daycare could be. Those are things I think to kind of look at in the future or when we're remodeling or whatever it is.
So what I'm hearing is determine how to support educational and growth goals of our residents through community partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah. Kathy, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I like what Arlene and Polly are talking about, and you remember the RISE program. Okay. I don't want to see a duplicate of that because that was very heavy administration and very, very involved. But it seems that there is a set of services that we could coordinate. And I would like to see the Housing Authority track the people that are in it. And that was one of the benefits of RISE. You remember too, Polly. But to offer it on a coordinated basis and track it, because in addition to daycare and educational opportunities, a lot of the people, especially the family level people, need to learn the nuts and bolts of credit and financial planning. And a lot of them need parenting skills. So there's a complete package that we could coordinate, but not necessarily administer. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And in terms of the mix of senior and family, as long as people know when they move in that that's what's happening, I think that's awesome. Because quite frankly, I think having young people around keeps seniors younger longer. So one of the questions I had for you, Kathy, when you were I'm backing up to the statistics that you had in the presentation, you were surprised at people being 20 years or 10, 20 years in the program. Were you specifically talking about Section 8?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okie doke.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as surprising in our properties to see that, especially the senior properties, that folks are there for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, the senior properties.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, the senior properties, 90% of the, or better of the, when people leave here, it's because they're not going anywhere else. So they do stick around. We've got people here that have been here 13 years. So I was just curious. But also, again, if we're looking at Section 8 and people being on it so long, they're on Section 8, but I don't think we've provided a support system to get them off. I think RISE was the first inroad to that. I may be wrong, but if we're going to do this and we want people to succeed, we need to provide more than just housing, but not necessarily we provide it directly. We provide the opportunity and encourage it.
Gene, I think you make a really good point with that, and others have brought this same thing up. And for me, I think back to what does the LHA do? What is our core? And maybe I'm overly simplistic, but when I look at it, I think we can administer and manage things. We can get access to different financial tools that, you know, Kathy went through at the beginning. And we have some property that we can let people use. And the question as we start talking about support services is, where do we stop and transition to others who offer those support services? So I would just suggest that we be careful that what we're doing is really linked to maybe those three things that we do at a basic level. And then as we start to get farther away from that core, we need to enlist outside agencies to pick that up. It's not to say we don't want to do another RISE program, but we may not want to be responsible for the core administration of it. We may want to encourage it and provide a space for it and connect our residents to it, but not be the one running the show.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, Cameron. I agree with you totally.
And Cameron, sorry, Gene. Yeah, if I can jump in, it's really kind of the hat piece for me. And so on the housing authority side, facilities, housing, those types of issues, that's this hat. Take this hat on, put the city manager hat on, and it's leveraging the programs that we have in our youth and family services where they do parenting classes and things like that, or leveraging the programs that we have via our economic developments and partnerships with Workforce Boulder County to then engage Workforce Boulder County with the same group that we're providing parenting classes to. And so to your point, and I agree with this completely, it really is taking the resources that we know we have available, and it may be as simple for the housing authority as we become the connector, and then from the city side, we then take the connections and start fleshing them out via our partnerships. And then they come in and provide the service. But at the end of the day, it's a seamless sort of one-stop shop for the people who live in the housing authority properties where they have access to this, but neither the city nor the housing authority is doing it all.
Yeah.
It's sort
Harold,
of
Harold, you just hit on why I really wanted LHA to go under the city, because the city does have access, and if not the resource, you have the access. And that's exactly what I saw, is it's simply the connector to get the resources used. So you're talking my language. Okay.
all right, great. And it ties into one of the council's goals too, where they wanted to get out with this is pre-COVID, revamping the mayor's book club and how different council members get into different locations. Seems simple, and it is, but impactful at the same time, because we're not relying on private locations for space. We can do it in different ways now that we're together. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Karen?
Go ahead. Karen, I see your
Yes,
cartoon
thank
hand.
you. So I just had a question, and maybe this is I'm guessing this is for Kathy. So I know that some other housing authorities do offer a family self-sufficiency program, and is that funded separate? So how are those funded? Are those funded separately, or I was just curious.
Yeah, so I think, and Lisa might know more as well. I think it might now be called moving to work. I can't remember if family self-sufficiency and moving to work are the same, or they've become one. And it's a separate application, it's separate funding, it's separate rules and regs. I know BHP, Boulder Housing Partners, they have moving to work vouchers and operate a program. I don't know if Boulder County Housing Authority does or not. I don't know if you're allowed to have more than one in an area. We just haven't been able to get into that yet, trying to sure what we have before we explore. But that's an opportunity.
That is an
perhaps.
opportunity. So I just wanted to clarify that. I was just interested because I know that is offered, and it is moving to work. Sorry. And so it could be a combination, like some of our properties are permanent supportive housing. So support services are part of that. And so what kind of combination of bringing entities in, what might we be able to apply for and provide support? So thanks for clarifying that.
You know, as we work through these, I'm looking at these objectives, and with maybe one exception under this item 1, I don't know how to know if we've gotten there. So, 5 years from now, have we achieved this? And the only one that has, and maybe I'm trying to channel a little bit of Dr. Waters here with metrics, but there's the objective that talks about gaining 10 new private market property owners willing to participate in the HCV program. So we can measure that one. The others are all pretty nebulous, and I wonder if we want to, maybe not in this moment, but at some point, try to distill those down to some targets that we can pursue.
Yeah, I would suggest if we go through these and determine what package per se we might want to provide to the LHA board for their consideration, see what they choose and come back with, because they might have other ones that they want to add, or there might be some that they don't want to include. And then, yeah, absolutely, we're going to have to drill down and figure out how we're going to do it and how we're going to measure it. You are correct.
Good.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Harold.
And I guess that was kind of one of my questions, because this is obviously what you all did pre us coming involved. But I think as we look at this, we need to frame the new objectives into how can you actually measure them and how can you determine success. And so I think that's part of the conversation we want to have is with you all and the Housing Authority Board is take these and reformat them in a way that we can measure them and measure our progress on an annual basis to know, are we doing what we said we were going to do? And I've even struggled with that. So, I mean, it's.
And as I was reading through this, I was thinking about, how we're linking them. I was looking up right above the 5-year plan goals that it talks about the city LHA merged vision. That's to build a continuum of housing opportunities. And also wondering if we're trying to collaborate to achieve some of the goals in Envision Longmont, or is there some other larger connection we're trying to make so that we're all pushing in the same direction, and we're not doing an LHA thing over here and the city's doing something different over here without that connection?
I would say so far we're very well aligned. The Envision Longmont goals are pretty broad. They do include attainable and affordable housing and partnership opportunities, early childhood education, all of those kinds of things. So I guess the other thing I would throw out is maybe give some thought to, do we need so many objectives as well? Because to manage and measure, et cetera, can be then a full-time job.
I'm a big fan of the number 3. That's when I ran out of energy for more kids in my family, and so I've kind of used that as a guide that once I get past 3, I run out of steam. If we could be a little more, especially since it's 5 years, that's not a long time. So we might want to pare this down over time. One of the comments I want to throw in, and then we got to roll on to 2, 3, 4, and 5. I wonder if in this objective number 1, or maybe even an overarching goal, that we make some reference to the fact that we want to, say, create affordable housing opportunities aligned with the goals of and using the resources of our partnership with the city, something like that acknowledges that we're in that umbrella now that we weren't when these were first put together. And I'm thinking of this in terms of, say, a year from now, when we have a concept come across the advisory board agenda, Element Properties comes in and they want to do X, Y, and Z on one of our projects. I'd like this 5-year plan goal to be kind of the litmus test that we use, so we can hold up their proposal against what we say our goals are to see if it matches. And so the more we can weave that into this, the more helpful it can be long-term.
Yeah, Kathy, I think it's maybe getting with Joni. So, because what I hear you saying in this is, you know, that aligns with Envision Longmont and the city's comprehensive plan. So as we're considering this, you know, sort of the things we talk about with developments, livable, walkable, dense urban communities. And so I think as we talk about that, maybe working with Joni to take those concepts and bring them into this, so that, for example, when we look at a project, it's not the traditional suburban style apartment concept, but is really in alignment with our vision, which is that more urbanized sort of look where we're maximizing the land that we have. Is that what I hear you saying, Cameron?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Polly.
I would like us to remember, though, that the whole point of a housing authority is a national goal. It stems from Depression era, but it actually is a national goal that has been around for hundreds of years to provide, and it should be one of our national principles, that everybody needs shelter, everybody needs a decent home. And we need to keep that in mind, that is really our only overall goal and objective and mission and whatever, is that every human being in this country deserves to have decent housing. And that's a national goal. It really has nothing to do with the city, but how we actually act that out does actually have to do with the city and the Envision Longmont plan. But I would like us to not lose track of the fact that all housing authorities are a national program and are overseen by national and statewide boards and authorities.
It's a good grounding reminder. So should we move on to some of the other goals and objectives in the list? How about number 2, to protect and enhance the properties and programs the LHA operates? Are we comfortable with this as written?
I have a question. Oh, the properties, yes. What are we talking programs? What programs are we talking about?
The Housing Choice Voucher Program would be the primary one.
Okay. That helps. Okay.
Well, and I think when you get into some of our other properties, specifically when we look at the suites and we look at the 202 properties in terms of the supportive services that we provide associated with those properties. So in that area, we'll go there. But predominantly HCV.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you know, to me, you know, what you'll hear me say to the board is really coming in and, you know, this is really about maintaining and connecting. What I would like to do is talk about setting some aspirational goals where we try to increase the amount of housing choice vouchers by X over X amount of time, so that we can set something that we can definitely work on and really set, and we'll talk about this as staff, but really set something where it, when I say aspirational, the likelihood of us meeting it is not high. Set it high enough to where you can really go, and then we can measure and understand and report back as to why we are or we're not making progress. So that's a piece of that I would like to see.
You're talking about the actual number of vouchers.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like to add to that is getting people up and off the voucher.
Right.
Okay, that I would like to see a turnover. And I don't know that we've ever tracked that. And I think that would be a neat goal, considering our discussion under item 1. I think it would be a neat goal that we turn it over. We fill more vouchers, but we also turn them over.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Actually, last night, our partners with VCP, they give challenge points as they rotate folks out of their tiny homes. So they move them
Yeah.
from the tiny home into a voucher and then into market rate. And so when they do that, they give them challenge coins. And I saw that last night and was thinking about, so how do we do that? And I think that is going back to your previous question, partnerships with Workforce Boulder County, all of these groups, so that we can
Right.
transition and move.
Right.
Because that's a different way to add capacity.
Okay.
Price stays the same, you just.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Polly?
I really, I like this. But I think one of the things that there's nothing more important than protecting and enhancing the properties and the programs that we operate. I think that one of the things we have done with the transition from what we had, Longmont Housing Authority, what we had to what we now have, is that we have greatly done this with something that's not even listed here. Our finances have been, I feel, shored up and strengthened and are on the right path. I felt like we were not at all on the right path before. And now we actually know what we're doing. We have a really hardy and clean system that is much easier to audit, much easier to take care of. And I feel like we know that our properties are going to be able to be maintained and protected because we have the financial base. Before, I felt like it was really quite chaotic. And so even though this isn't listed, at the heart of this is that we have the financial ability to maintain and protect our programs. So I think we've done swell on this.
So I wonder if we want to actually address that, because I think that's a key point under this number 2. One would be ensuring that we have continued financial stability and the ability to carry out our mission. And then the second, I was thinking of as I look at enhance the properties, do we want to talk about the actual property? Make sure that every single property asset, every single residence is, meets code, is well maintained, is being renewed and updated as often as reasonably possible. A lot of the kind of things that would have helped us avoid HUD's partnership with us over the past several years, if you want to call it a partnership. So I wonder if we want to put the physical infrastructure into this plan at all.
So a couple things that I wrote down as part of this discussion to add to maybe number 2 is around maintaining operational and replacement reserves that meet the requirements of, meet or exceed the requirements of the investor funding. We can add something around the code and HQS, decent, safe, and sanitary housing kind of thing.
Kathy, I think this may be the place I heard earlier as we talk about the resyndication process, where we may get
Reinvest.
the reinvestment and resyndication in properties. And we set the goal, we set the measurable target on this and maybe this is what we need to do, is look at it and go, if we're going to do this, then we're going to be aggressive in the reinvestment, to everyone's point, but what Cameron just mentioned, here's the schedule we want to hit. And we lay that schedule out, so we hold ourselves accountable to the timing on this. And then if we can't do it, we need to report back to the advisory board and the board and go, well, here was the schedule, here's what happened. But I think set that plan in this. where we can really target it. And we can probably spend some time before the 9th on pulling that together. I think that's what I hear you all say.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is if we have a specific plan and a target for regularly maintaining and upgrading our portfolio.
And we are implementing new policies and procedures around that as well. So it was haphazard, I think, in the past to a certain extent. But Lisa and the maintenance team have instituted very specific policies and procedures around inspecting the properties and maintaining them, and working with the city to try and have standardized features within properties as well, so that we aren't buying all kinds of different faucets, for example, but we have, a faucet that is used that, is easily accessible. We could even have a couple spares and move forward. That would save time and money.
Well, fun. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, are there any properties that need to be refurbished in the next 5 years that we know, just like Aspen Meadows? And we could put them kind of on the goals of saying, hey, we will refurbish XYZ properties within the next 5 years.
Yeah, we have Village Place, apartment, Aspen Meadows apartments,
Neighborhood.
Aspen Meadows neighborhoods. Yeah, Aspen Meadow neighborhood, Village Place, and then we probably hit Lodge Hearthstone.
Yeah,
especially
if they come out of the 202 program, we're exploring that to try and take them out of the 202. In which case we will have to do a capital needs assessment of what needs to happen, if anything that major that needs to be replaced, and then have a plan for how we're going to do that in order to take them out of the 202 program. So
yeah, I mean that and what's important about this is financially for us, and you've heard me talk about this, understanding that schedule and sticking to it is incredibly important, because that brings revenue into the system. Just like understanding for us the development of these new properties is important, because what I've learned in this, and I talked to you all about it, I didn't quite understand. I was seeing things like one-time funding that was being used for ongoing expenses. Well, what happened is the re-syndication and the development was supposed to be treated as an ongoing revenue stream for different properties. Well, when that slowed down, that ultimately is what hit financially to everything else. And so that's why I really like the idea of planning this out, because that ensures that revenue stream is coming in continually. And when we know it's about to end, we need to start planning on what the next new development is so we can keep it. And then it allows us to really plan for how we collectively start managing the budget from an operational basis to ensure that there may be a point in time where we can't do anything new or rehab for a few years. We at least plan for it so that it's not hitting us all of a sudden.
Anything else on number 2? All right, let's roll to number 3, to develop an organizational infrastructure so the LHA can efficiently manage its operations. Step 1, ask city to take over operations. Check.
Check.
That was a long, hard check, though. About 2 years in the making, and painful. Yes. And gray hair inducing, I know. All right, so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 objectives relating to our organizational infrastructure.
Cameron,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would just as soon toss out objective 1. I think it's too, if we're going to have a goal of being high performing, just say that. But then define high performing is going to get us into a lot of detail. So I just as soon throw it out and let's just put in the objectives, what is high performing, and make that instead of this fluffy phrase that's objective one.
So
I take it nobody agrees with me.
being a high performing agency, that is related to the, I think it's the CMAP score, which is under the Section 8 program. So it is very specific criteria about what you have to do, and a whole point system to get high points, medium, low, underperforming, in trouble.
Yeah, I would rather have it stated that way, just how you described it, rather than to say high performing. It sounds like an ad slogan instead.
Polly, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained that, Kathy. I agree with Jean, because it sort of seems like we're looking backwards and saying we're so ashamed. We have to make up and make ourselves reclaim our reputation or something. I would just say maintain our status as a high performing agency, even if we're not there right now. I would rephrase it a little differently so it doesn't look like we're claiming we're ashamed of ourselves and we have to somehow make up for something in the past. Is sort of backward looking. I want us to be forward looking and not forget about, but just move forward.
How about consistently achieve a designation as a housing?
Yes, that would be good.
Something like that.
Yes, that would be good.
And then
because then
it
makes clear that it is a national standard that we are going to uphold. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. You want to move on to the second one, Cameron?
Please.
Because I'm objecting to that one too, because that shouldn't be an objective. That should be a task that meets the objective of one. I see nods heading. Okay.
Agreed.
Well, honestly, if we want to get down to just like 3 goals, I would say let's axe this one entirely if we want to be tracking this. Because I think, number 1 and 2 are priorities. And if we just want to get down to 3 different goals, I'd say let's not necessarily worry about this one.
Yeah.
This is what we want to do.
And I think that's where we can come in and maybe set the operational goals for us to say what we want to do. And that becomes, to me, obviously we didn't want to skew the conversation today, but what I would say, these are really operational goals that we need to do internally as administrators. And I would probably, and I see Karen jumping in, we want to talk.
I think they're operational standards.
Yeah.
It is the standards of excellence that we should be performing every day.
And so I'm not
kind
sure
of
it fits here.
Given. Yeah.
I'm not sure it fits. And then I think to the operational goals, we then go and we're more aggressive, kind of what Lisa's doing, that says the standards we want to set is our vacancy rate will be this. Our turnover rate will be this.
Right.
Our time to flip will be this. And I think those are things we need to work on. And so I would agree with kind of what both Jean and Tom are saying, but Tom's point of, I don't know if it fits into this section.
Yeah, I agree with Tom that this is too operational.
And for me, what I ask you all and the board to do, set our targets. Tell me from a policy perspective what you want us to achieve, and then it's our job to achieve it. And then if we don't achieve it, then you all hold us accountable for not achieving it. And sort of as a overarching philosophy for me.
Maybe under one of the other categories, we just have an objective that the LHA, and I'm thinking the board and the advisory board, ensures that the administration of the LHA establishes and achieves kind of high performing operational goals that are in support of the balance of our mission. Do we have any
Yeah, we kinda
objective?
get into the issue with measuring that though, Cameron. It's like we
Yeah.
gotta kind of put together, how do we measure that?
Word count. I just say of at least 500 words. No,
Well,
that's-
I think if you
Count for
did that, I think if you did that, what we could do is then take the objectives like I just talked about
Mhm.
and apply the objectives to the point of, here's what HUD says to be high performing on
Right.
HCV. Here's what we need to do.
Right.
Here's what we do on the timeframes. And so it really becomes the objectives underneath that broad goal of that you talked about. And we can maybe work on some stuff and refine it for y'all. But to your point, Tom, I think it's
Yeah.
important, because if you just say it and you don't have the measurable objectives, then it becomes nebulous again.
Mhm.
And so I think we could really we can work to try to fill that. Otherwise, we're back to where we started.
Well, then I have another question too for you, Harold. How is the voucher program? How does HUD determine additional vouchers that can be used by the housing authority? Is it a formula based? Like, how can we expand that and increase the number of vouchers that we have? Or maybe Kathy, this is a question for you.
Well, so part of it's a budget versus how many vouchers you can use and what's going on in the community. So our budget, and we're using all of our budget, and right now we can only do 400 some vouchers, even though we are allowed to go up to 509, I think it is. The rents right now are not aligning with the budget. So you can apply for additional vouchers, additional budget, but you have to have good performance in order to do that and show that there's a need. Sometimes they only open it up every so often. And then there's special programs like the Moving to Work program, or well, they're doing away with the SRO program, the single room occupancy one, or the substantial rehab one. They have a whole bunch of separate programs as well that you need to.
And we just had the
track and look at.
emergency
Mhm.
housing choice vouchers. That was a special allocation.
So I think to answer your question, you need to be high performing in the way they measure you, so that when there are opportunities that present themselves, you fall into those opportunities. And it's like most federal programs, the stronger you are and the higher they rate you, the more able you're going to be to increase. And I think that's what at least Karen and Kathy and I've talked about. I think we may have historically missed opportunities.
Mhm.
And if this is incorrect, Kathy, Karen, catch me on it, but my gut would say, I think historically we haven't been able to take advantage of opportunities because of perception and how we operated. And so we need to get to that high level so that when there are funds available, they look to us and go, this is somebody who can use it well, spend it fast, and do this. Similar to kind of what's happening. The example I will use is on the CDBG DR work that we're doing with the state, where we're at a point now where they come and say, here's money collaborative, here's money Longmont, because they know we can turn it, we can meet all of their requirements. We need to be in that same position with HUD. Is that a fair statement, Kathy?
Yeah, I think the other thing is philosophically, and it might be tied to the goal about reducing the dependence on HUD. I'm not sure. I think that's part of the reason why some of the opportunities under the Housing Choice Voucher Program weren't aggressively pursued. And development opportunities were. And if you look at BHP and what they've done, they have 1,200 vouchers and a high level of new construction. So I think it's really has to be both together in
Right.
order to really sufficiently house the community that needs it.
And I think philosophically for you all on this, I mean, that is probably that's probably one of the big differences in the city coming in versus what was there. You know, we're not saying we don't need to rely on HUD. We're saying we need to rely on HUD, but we need to be judicious on where we rely on HUD. And so the 202 property is probably not where we need to go. but we need to take advantage of the programs and rely on them so we can add operational dollars. And I think that's probably one of the biggest differences today versus what you all were told before. And I can't control that, is we're saying, no, we need them there, but where it makes sense, not just we need them out. And I think that's where boards and everyone else are so dependent on staff in these issues. And that's why we want to educate everyone, so you can check us if you go, well, this doesn't make sense, because you know what you know.
Yeah, kind of along with that. So the vouchers, I'm just trying to come up with, we're trying to come up with measurable goals. How many additional vouchers should we then say? Could we say we want to increase our vouchers, say, by 10% in 5 years? And then
I would say 25, and then give us something to reach for.
25%.
So
Yeah.
Kendra, what is the realistic opportunity to increase our vouchers short of having additional programs that we might be able to apply for?
Yeah, so honestly, it's all dependent upon rent. Like right now, everybody's receiving the average subsidy holder is receiving about $1,100 in subsidy from our voucher program. When the rent's lower, we have more money and more budget to release more vouchers. But as rents increase, we lose the opportunity. And so I don't know that they were effectively following the 2-year tool in the past. So they weren't vouchering up and they weren't spending enough money. Therefore, HUD wasn't giving them more money every year. So we didn't spend enough money this year, but we are at a limit where we probably can't add any more vouchers yet because of the rental increase that has occurred. Therefore, we're already into our two-year limit so that we don't go bankrupt. And that's what we've kind of learned, is that sometimes housing authorities go, full force in that first year and don't realize it's really a 2-year analysis, and they go bankrupt the next year because now they can't provide these vouchers that they've released. So it is really.
Go ahead.
Oh no, it's a monitoring.
It's a monthly analysis that we're doing now with this 2-year tool and we did just release 10 vouchers and have leased those up, or at 9, I think, total. So we're watching that and monitoring it. And the more we can push or talk to HUD about, if we have X number of folks on our wait list and we can't serve them, is there any ability to get additional budget? Those kinds of conversations we need to start having and really pushing for, I think.
Well, and this, I'll use what everybody refers to as a heraldism. It is the spend cycle that we get into, in that if you don't spend your money, they'll even consider taking your money away, right, Kendra? And so you have to spend your money in order to get money. But if we historically weren't spending the money, then we need to spend it so they don't take it away, but then show the need, so that then when the increase in the rents and everything comes into place, we positioned ourselves to get more money, which then allows us to look at other concepts. And so it really is anchored in that high performance and setting the target goal of we want to increase by X. And in order to do that, it's Kendra's explanation that you start building out and what you need to do to reestablish, rebaseline, and position yourself for growth.
But yeah, it comes back to being efficient and high performing.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you're not going to get the money. So.
Correct.
And tracking it, and just tracking it all the time. That's the thing.
I will add too, with the number of additional property owners that have come into the program just so far, that's telling us something. I don't know how off that is from prior years. I think it's pretty off. I think it's a lot more. Just anecdotally, we'd have to do some statistic gathering. But I think that's telling us something. And one of them was a major property manager that came back onto the program. So something might start shifting in the market. Is is what I'm taking from that, that there might be a shift in rents going down a little bit or something for them to come back onto the program and have that guaranteed income, where before they dropped off when rents were increasing and they could have guaranteed income already. So we'll monitor it and see. It's all monitoring.
So as it relates to this third goal, are we comfortable removing that and kind of restating it as a kind of administrative goal that we just make sure that they have a plan in place and we double check the objectives in that administrative
Yes,
plan?
Cameron, I agree with removing it.
Okay. Anyone else object to that? All right, let's move on to number 4. And as I just glance at this, I'm wondering if this is already captured somewhere else, but the goal is to develop, enhance, and strengthen external relationships with key partners, other agencies, and the larger community. It's hard to argue that that's important, but I wonder if is it its own individual goal, and if it is, fine. By the way, I'm not saying we have to have only three of these. I just like that number. I just want it closer to 3.
So this is something that you have done in the past. You've partnered with Habitat, you've partnered with Longmont Community Housing. You're partnering with Element moving forward. I think what isn't here is some of the other more soft service relationships, I would say. And they might be well captured in some of the other things, goals, especially with some of the changes that we have made. But those around, what's the dreamers? I have a dream.
I have a dream.
And some of the RISE things, some of the other softer services that we talked about, serving on some of the different collaboratives and teams that is out in the community around homelessness, around well, primarily homelessness, but also some of the other affordable housing collaboratives that we have going. In the past, there have been quite robust partnerships, and then it kind of fell off. But I think there's certain ones that really should be attended again by various housing authority staff so that they know what's going on in the community. They can react to things, they can have input, et cetera, about what we're experiencing. And then the whole development of housing. Yeah, some of this is captured in probably number 1, creating affordable housing opportunities. But it felt important enough to call it out separately, that really it is around additional partnership opportunities.
Karen?
So if a suggestion, and again, we wouldn't necessarily do it on the fly here today, but partnerships can also be really seen as an approach. I think, as Kathy mentioned, that we have partnerships kind of interspersed into the different goal areas and objectives. So if you wanted us to look at how to consider partnerships as an approach and making sure that we include a partnership approach into some of these other goals and outcomes, we could certainly approach it that way. Because you don't just partnership just to have it, there's a reason that you have a partnership, and it really is to accomplish, the various goals and objectives that you have set forth.
I kind of like that. I mean, as I was talking earlier about the 3 basic things that I thought we do, to me, we establish these goals, and if it's right within our wheelhouse, we do it. But the farther it gets from that core, the more we have to engage other partners in the process. So my sense is that it's sort of woven through the other pieces. It's a tool that we use to achieve the goals, not necessarily goal in and of itself. But I do hear what Kathy's saying about it being important enough that we might want to call it out in some fashion. So.
Well, and it kind of goes along with that spectrum that you guys gave us last meeting, where those are all the other, either transitional housing or shelters that fit into the whole housing need, and we're just one part of that as well.
So what do we do with this one?
Well, I'll go back to, I don't think we can measure it again. I mean, we could put it out there, but there's nothing, honestly, I see that we can measure it with, unless, we're just, actively doing it.
Can I give you all a suggestion based on what I've heard?
Please.
So what I would do is take this one and then take your other goals that you established. And this may, in some cases, fall under the objectives of some of the other goals, or be a goal within its own component in the other sections. And then to the point of, okay, now what do we do to achieve this? And then how do we put it in a way where we can measure it and understand whether or not we're making progress? So we may need to refine some of these. And I don't have my usual 3 screens, so I'm back and forth. So if you go to partner with local nonprofit agencies, we can get specific and to say, who do we want to partner with? How do we want to partner with them? And what do we want to create? First right of refusal clauses, that goes into our development work. How many land donations or on-site construction do we want to get on an annual basis? And in the land donation, I think for the housing authority is the most important piece, so that they're at the forefront of the conversation with the developers who are building. So, we want X number of acres a year via land donation to the housing authority through the inclusionary housing process. I think that's how we can get some of these and put it in other sections. Point 5, the objective is home ownership. I think that goes back to the previous conversations that we've had on the development side, and maybe we blend it in there. So we can work on that for you all, but I really see this as being components of the other goals and objectives. And these may be tasks that helps us achieve that. Kathy, Karen?
I think that works.
So I like that suggestion. The one piece when we just touch on number 5 that I was going to suggest we try to weave in this somehow is to have some goals and objectives that are focused on our residents. There's a lot of focus on development and programs and buildings, but I'd like to have something in here that talks about the people and what we're doing to make their lives better in the, through these other things. And I think those other things are doing that, but I just would like to see it in the text here in some fashion.
I would agree. And I was going to suggest that to me, I think number 5 really is about the people. I mean, it could be. And so I just think, so maybe we can look at how do we shore that one as about the people, and then other things that we need to move elsewhere, we can, but
yeah.
If you don't want a people goal, that's okay. But that one is what that one seems to be about.
I want a people goal.
Well, it would be the 3rd goal. because you've knocked out 3 and 4. We're weaving into the other one, so you only have 2 so far.
And I think where I was going on
Goal
the
of 3.
in the people goal, I think we were still talking about development and those things. And
Mhm.
so when we want to look at it for people, it's there's some operational components in terms
Mhm.
of how fast, when we have problems, how fast do we respond to problems in units and get them back. So that's more of an operational component to the people. Then we look at how do we create program partnerships to provide more services that we're not in order to support people, or programs, what kind of develop programs that we offer in each one of the residential units so that I don't know, Karen, this is Karen's world more than mine. But the
It's kind of properties, programs, and people.
yeah, and on the people, what do we give our tenants? So it's not just a house,
right?
But it's a community, and it supports them in the community. And
I think this and what Jean has been saying about the move on,
Right.
move up options or opportunities. I think that's
Mhm.
where this one could go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go
Am I
ahead.
mute?
And then I think Polly
Okay.
had something.
Well, I've got this mute sign up there and I don't understand that. In terms of the family properties, which I'm delighted to see us looking at doing more of, the grow part is critical, and what we talked about with daycare and other services that can be coordinated. We still have all these senior properties, and it's a different animal. It's got to be handled differently. We won't have the same goals for seniors as we're going to have for the families. Seniors, we need to focus on keeping their life as comfortable and pleasant as they can for however long they're going to be here. So the programs need to fit the property. Do you make sense? Okay.
And the one piece that we talked about that I didn't see it on this, but what I would say is that we need to think about too is, as we think about programs and opportunities and partnerships, one of the things that I'm seeing that we're challenged with on a regular basis, and I'm trying to think if it's in there, I can't go back and forth, but what we know is that in terms of affordable housing for older adults, what we have is independent living. What we're seeing, though, is that there are folks that probably shouldn't be in independent living because of everything from where they are with their physical abilities to mental abilities, dementia coming into play, all of those things. And so I don't know if it's in the development, the partnership world, or what it is, but it really is, how do we look at opportunities to partner with folks to have other opportunities for those that may need more robust services than independent living. Because what it does is it also pressures us operationally in different ways. And so I don't know if it's a development goal, if it's a program goal, but it fits into this mix of how do you have affordable opportunities for assisted living, or even some of our memory care components that are coming into play. And again, that may just be a facilitator.
Yes.
But it's in the mix.
Exactly. We might just be the facilitator for that, because we run into two problems. One is people are in independent living and they can do some of the independent living stuff, but they still aren't disabled enough to move to be accepted into assisted living.
Right.
So we've got this gap that we're inadvertently filling that doesn't exist in the private sector. But the other thing is that maybe there are services that we can tap into to bring into the independent environment that will help with the people that have mental and more severe physical. And right now that's done through insurance companies, but for each individual. But there might be something that gets developed on a broader scale so that we can refer our residents to it. But that's a dream I've got.
Well, and I'm having conversations with a local group right now that provide services like grocery shopping. They can come in and maybe cook, and they can do other things. And they approached us. And so those are things we can maybe build in. I'm being vague and cagey right now because it's not to the point where they want to be known. But I think those are, we got to figure out where it fits, because we've got to start working and targeting this issue, because we can see it impacting us and challenging us. In many cases, Lisa, I would argue on a daily basis at times.
Holly?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's a very, very difficult situation because, you know, we do have a lot of senior living, and there comes a point where many people become much more severely disabled physically, but also sometimes mentally. And it somewhere along the line, somebody has to call it and say, we can't take care of you here anymore because it's too dangerous for you. But also, as you said, Harold and Jean, there are services. I know when my mother was getting older, she became blind, and she was still just as feisty as ever and extremely independent. But she did need some help with bathing to be healthy, you know, to be safe, and with cleaning and with a few things like that. And if we had a partnership with one of those services where somebody could come in and just spend a little bit of time with somebody, clean up a little bit, talk while you're cleaning up, and, you know, help somebody with a few of those personal issues, that would help them stay in our facilities longer. But at some point, this is very difficult. When do you say to somebody, you have to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to say, and devastating. And but on the other hand, we can't have people living in our housing that are not really being properly taken care of.
But Polly, sometimes we don't have a choice, because we cannot evict somebody on that. We would not evict anybody on that.
Right.
But we have to have their family agree
Yes.
and get them to move, because especially in a memory, a dementia, Alzheimer's situation, that person doesn't know that they're the trouble they're in.
That's right.
And so getting the family involved, it can be extremely difficult. It can take 2 or 3 years, and it's scary.
Yeah.
So having something that we can access and bring on site would be extremely helpful, because not only for that resident, because that kind of situation affects every other resident. You're in a small building. Okay. So,
well, and I want to be clear, there are times where, depending on what's happening with an individual, if the individual is threatening the safety of the entire area,
it has to be.
Then we will evict, because you can't threaten 50 other households because of routine fires and things like that. And so we're also balancing. And I know this sounds hard. We're balancing the individual with everyone else. And at the end of the day, we have to ensure the safety of everyone in the property. So I wanted to be clear on this. There are times when we have to do that, and it's when it is a direct threat to the safety of the other folks who are living in the complex. And is that the way
That's
to
right.
say it, Karen?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And Lisa might want to chime in, but obviously we do everything in our
Right.
influence to help make that transition work
Right.
for the benefit
Right.
of the resident.
Right.
Yeah, we do everything we can, but we've encountered times where the safety issue has become so significant, we've had to do what we've had to do.
Because it is an
Yeah.
independent living property, and at some point
Right.
in time, even with services, it is it is no longer the right housing for
Yeah.
individuals.
And part of it is,
Exactly. And I just want to,
go ahead.
I was going to say last week, just kind of a partnership with the senior services that Michelle was able to help us. We did get a resident into a care facility up in Berthoud that takes Medicare, get him out of the situation he was in at the Hearthstone that was making it unpleasant for other residents, the fire department. It was a great collaboration. The fire department making reports, us making reports, senior services making reports, all of our agencies working together to better the life of one resident.
Yeah, I just had to jump in because I didn't want folks to think that, because I mean, and you'll probably get complaints and we have to deal with it. And I wanted to be very clear where we are.
Right. Yeah.
Right, so have we provided enough guidance on that final goal, Kathy?
I don't know why my space bar wasn't working anymore. So I would like to hear thoughts. Do we want to go into home ownership? That is a big difference and a big leap for what the Housing Authority is doing. It was talked about last time. I wasn't sure whether it was truly getting into providing home ownership opportunities or more trying to prepare people for that growth opportunity and step up from rental housing for families in particular. But I would like to hear more from the advisory board around that.
Polly?
You know, the only way to get people out of the constantly escalating rents and lack of control over their life of being a renter is to get them into home ownership. But the problem is that they have to be able to afford it long term, or else we're not doing anybody any favors. We're actually creating a worse situation for them. We already do have some kind of assistance, and we also have lots of counseling on financial and credit issues and how to help people get into those. I think that's a great idea. I would like us to see if we can provide, if we can build some home ownership possibilities. So far, we've kind of turned that over to Habitat, which does an excellent job because they do sweat equity and they do extensive counseling. But I would like to see us do more to help provide home ownership opportunities, because that is ultimately the best way for our society to pass on intergenerational wealth and to create a better situation for most people in our society.
I mean, I say we partnership with Habitat for Humanity, but I think we have such a need right now for low income rentals that's where we fit in, and that's kind of what our goal is. The other thing I forgot to mention too is maybe we focus also on like the 50% AMI properties as well, because we seem to be saturated in the 30% AMI, but I see us as providing affordable rentals. And if there is some housing, we could see if it's a possibility, if it would fit, like especially if we get a land donation, that it would work better as a housing for actually houses that people can purchase. But I think we just stick to our niche and our swim lane and just be affordable rentals.
Ollie?
Some of these, in our last goal, some of these things talk specifically about this, and I mentioned this earlier. We can help people. A lot of places in the world do this. We can help people gradually get into this by putting them in a situation where they can self-finance this themselves over time through cooperatives, through ROC and organizations like that. Or we can buy the land, they can buy it back from us, and that way it stays affordable. And I just don't think we are, I really do think that we need to be thinking about ways that we can help people get into home ownership with different models like cooperatives, rent to own, and community land trusts, and did I say cooperatives? Yes. Anyway, things where the city buys the land or the city has the land, and then they can buy it back from us at a much lower rate that they would be buying a home otherwise. And then they can own it and maintain it and take care of it themselves. In other words, we help them upfront in a gradual way, and then they can take care of it themselves.
Harold?
One of the things, if I can make another suggestion, is when we look at the home ownership piece, and maybe we frame it as a partnership on home ownership, because when I look at what we do on the city side, so now not the LHA side, but the city side, and you look at down payment assistance, we purchase 9 acres of property for affordable housing. It may be that that's probably operationally a better fit on the city side, but we partner with each other across to accomplish that goal, because we have that system built internally. And if we wanted to create, so for example, in the 9 acres that we're purchasing associated with the Costco project, what we may want to do is go out for, and again, this manufactured housing starts showing itself again, but really create an RFP for here's what we want to do in terms of home ownership opportunities. But maybe the housing authority's piece on this is it all may not be home ownership. It may be a mix of rental and home ownership to kind of then blend and have transitions. But maybe it's framed more in a partnership to ensure that we have affordable home ownership partnerships with the city side of the house to ensure that we have affordable home ownership opportunities, so that when we do transition people, there are things available for them to transition into. And that may be kind of channeling Tom's comment, maybe how we frame that conversation, because I would suggest we don't want to necessarily duplicate it if we already have something that we're building on this side of the house.
Yeah, I like that. Kathy, is that clear enough to work into something for discussion next month?
Yes, I think so. Arlene, you had your hand up before.
Oh,
Did
sorry,
you
I missed that.
Well, the only thing I was going to say was that I think it's important to work with people towards home ownership. I just don't want us to be the ones that get stuck with a house that's been totally trashed. And then we have to go in and do something about it. I think home ownership, we can help them get there, and then they need to pick up the ball and deal with it at that point.
So it seems like that LHA's role is really help to facilitate, folks being able to move into home ownership, but our wheelhouse is in terms of building and managing properties is really at the affordable rental arena. That's our wheelhouse in terms of what we own and manage. Is that correct?
Then, what I would throw in, Karen and Kathy, there's this gray area that I've been in other communities. And so I've talked to Kathy about this, where we partnered with the National Development Council, where they sort of blend the models in a rent to own concept. And let me just baseline, not rent to own as we all know it, where it basically fleeces the individuals of what they're putting in rent, but truly rent to own, where you work in the programs and you transition it. And in that partnership, that may be where the housing authority does fit from a property management perspective, because on the front end of that program, you're managing the property knowing they're moving to home ownership. And then you start the transition. And I think, again, it's a gray area, but that's that partnership, because there may be a piece in a model like that that does fit more on this side of the house than it fits on the other side of the house. We've never really had that opportunity as a city. When I did it in the other community, that company ended up having to take it all because we didn't really do that. But they do models where if you have the capacity, they work with you in taking that approach. So kind of refining that partnership model.
So are we ready to move on from this, or we want to discuss this a little bit more? I suggest that we move on. Looking at our schedule, I don't know who's running this meeting, but we're way over time. I'd like to move to 4B, options for in-person meetings. I'll just share my personal thought. I'm ready for in-person meetings. So if there is an opportunity for that, a good location for that, I'm all ears. Arlene?
And I'm open to in-person meetings too. I would just like to know from Harold, can you just give us, a real short version of what exactly the restrictions are?
There's pretty much not, unless you go over, what's the number now, Karen? I think they've removed all restrictions as of the other day.
Even remove the numbers.
Yeah, they removed the numbers, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Unless, again, it's in specific, unless you're in congregate settings or childcare or, things like that. But
for our purposes, we're good.
We're free. We have freedom.
Okay.
Other than if you're not vaccinated, they still, encourage you to wear a mask if you're unvaccinated, but we're good.
So I would suggest that when the next meeting comes out, you all just tell us where we're supposed to go and we just go there.
As councils, do you want it in a formal setting or a less formal setting?
For the advisory board?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the less formal setting. Just makes the kind of things we discuss a little
Less
easier.
formal.
Let's just do it in the council study session room, and we'll make sure it's available, Karen.
Okay, so let's move on. I will point out it's 9:53, and so I know we all maybe have other pressures on us, but we do have the city report. Perhaps just a high-level summary if there are things we need to touch on.
So it looks like your report is first. Lisa, if you want your vacancy report.
All right. I guess maybe it's a question of, given that we just have about 5 minutes, is there anything that you have questions about that were in the packet, or Lisa, Harold, Kendra? Is there anything that you really want to make sure that the advisory board knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jean, go ahead.
On the budget to actual, which I was really glad to see. And of course, I focused in on Aspen Meadows Senior Apartment under tenant services expenses. There is a huge, 35,000 actual, and we only budgeted less than 1,000. Is that related to the construction moves and that kind of thing?
It is,
Okay.
and we are actually going to. We want to track it separately, but what we're going to do is I'm going to create a separate WIP account for relocation, and we're
Okay.
going to move that over onto the balance sheet.
All right.
until it's closed. But yeah, it was being tracked as a soft cost, so it should have been expensed, but they believe some of that can be
expense to the whole the whole renovation. Yeah,
correct.
Okay. That I had another question that's come up several times in the last couple of weeks on utilities. The second floor of Aspen Meadows, the lights go dim in the hallways at night unless somebody comes out into the hallway. But that does not happen on first and third floors. And I was wondering, do you have information that dimming the lights saves on utilities? And if it does, could we implement it on first and third floor? I'm just tossing that out.
I'll pass that on to Molly, who's
Okay.
our project
Should be.
manager.
It should be happening on both, and yes, it reduces the usage. So that may be that's a punch list item.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
Okay.
Arlene?
Is that same process in effect for Silver Creek and Fall River? Because at
I
night,
do know it is
looks
at
like
Silver
this.
Creek.
Okay, at night it looks like it's fairly bright over there. I just was wondering if they go dim.
I don't know. I mean, that was the way it was built, so we'll have to look into it. But that's the change in how we remodel and things that we're looking at. So I'm not sure, Lisa.
I do know Spring Creek does have that same feature in their hallways. I am not sure about Fall River.
Any other questions, Tom?
Yeah, just on the financial report, is this as of May 31st?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question I had, though, is just comparing the budget to actual. It seems the actuals are quite a bit higher than what we had budgeted for. You know, for instance, like Aspen Meadows, like I'm just looking at net tenant income is 27.
Income?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
so
27%.
we are finding a few anomalies that are happening there. Partly because in the past, for the project-based vouchers and the tenant-based vouchers, the housing authority wasn't going up to the fair market rent. And so they're doing that as these vouchers are being recertified so that these subsidy agencies. The problem we found this Friday was that they're also increasing that as the market rent within our system, which is why it's also, so if that unit goes vacant and let's say the market rent is now up to the fair market rent of $14.12, you're also getting that vacancy at $4.12 as well. So you're seeing an increase in the vacancies numbers as well. So we're going to have to do a reconciliation once we get all of these properties market rent back to the LIHTC rent, because that is what can actually be charged to the tenant if they don't have subsidy. So we need to make sure that's there. So that's why you're seeing an increase. I mean, even in Fall River, because of what they underwrited it as, and that was before they knew about the whole fair market not being done on these vouchers. We had to go down for underwriting purposes budget wise. So we know we're going to see an increase there in rent as well.
Any other questions on the city report?
The only thing I will add, unless it's changed, Cameron, just so you know, the calls for service based on the changes we made at Lodge and Hearthstone with the devices, calls for service for police and fire at the suites, those have dramatically decreased over the last few months. To the last report, knock on wood, that I had from police, we had in a week, we had no calls for service at the suites. And I think we tend to average at least a 1 or 2. So in terms of where we were on a lot of these properties to where we are today, there's a significant change that's occurred, and that's really the partnership with across all properties of the property managers in conjunction with Michelle and Senior Services and our support services and the interactions we've had. Is that still correct? I wasn't there Friday on the last update, but is that still correct, Lisa?
We've had a few calls this week, but it's from things sending outside of the property that police are following up, doing welfare checks, and just doing due diligence on.
Yeah.
But no big issues anymore.
Good news. Why don't we move on to item 6, other business? Anything else for the good of the order here today? All right. Oh, Karen,
So-
you caught us.
So just, so I'm sorry, this is just to clarify, the council retreat is actually a 6-hour window. We will send out an agenda to all of the board members in terms of when the LHA discussion is a good portion of that retreat. So we will get that revised agenda out to you as soon as possible. And we are going to hold the retreat at the Hearthstone Community Room. So yay, someone you're familiar with, but that's where we're going to be holding it. That's it.
Great. So we'll wait to hear from you on that. And then I'm assuming that that's on the 9th. Then we'll have a follow-up meeting where we can debrief on July 20th. All right, if there's no further business, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks for a long morning. We'll talk to you soon.